Hello, it's Ava. I'm taking over our daily news podcast Post Reports today because there's this huge game this weekend in women's soccer. It's the National Women's Soccer League championship match on Saturday. I wanted to share that episode with you here, and after you listen, don't forget to head over to the Post Reports feed and subscribe to get more great stories from the Washington Post. If you're interested in my newsletter, you can also sign up for that. It is a weekly guide to the buzziest stories in sports, and it's called The Sports Moment. And stay tuned to this feed. We'll be dropping more sports-centric episodes in the future. Okay, Steve Goff, you are one of two reporters that we are sending out to Kansas City to cover the game this weekend, so I know where you will be. But Ella, where will you be watching the championship match?
I will be watching probably at my house while I do my job as an editor for the Post, but I do plan on having a multi-screen setup.
Okay.
So I am excited for that.
From the newsroom of the Washington Post, this is Post Reports. I'm Ava Wallace. I'm a reporter and writer of the newsletter The Sports Moment here at the Post, and I am your guest host today. It's Wednesday, November 20th. Today, we're talking about a huge game this weekend to end the National Women's Soccer League season. The Washington Spirit and Orlando Pride are meeting in Kansas City to play for the championship, and it's been a really big season for the NWSL, which has come a long way since the league started in 2012. It's been a watershed few years for women's sports in general, so we wanted to talk about how soccer fits in. I'm joined by Steve Goff, our soccer writer for the Post, who is in Kansas City to cover the NWSL championship on Saturday. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Ava. Great to be here with you.
I'm also joined by Ella Brockway, an editor for the Post, who also covers soccer for us when you've got time, which you have so much of. Hi, Ella.
Hi, Ava. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, so if I had to guess, I think when most people imagine women's soccer, like the image that comes to mind is maybe like purple-haired Megan Rapinoe doing the swan celebration with her like arms wide. But of course, women's soccer is not just the World Cup. It's not just the Olympics, and it's wider than the U.S. women's national team. So, Steve, could you tell us a little bit about the history of kind of domestic leagues in the U.S. and about the two now defunct leagues that preceded the NWSL?
Yeah, I mean, the first two leagues failed for business reasons. You know, WUSA between 2001, 2003 lasted 3 seasons. Later, soccer started up again for the women with WPS, women's professional soccer, lasted 3 seasons. It really struggled to catch on, and it didn't have the full support of the business community. And along came the NWSL, and they faced huge hurdles. There's always been kind of a situation where, is women's pro soccer a cause or is it a business? And for a long time, it was just a cause. You know, we need role models. We need a place for women's players to make a living. That was the cause. The cause only takes you so far. It had to be the right business. And the interest in the game has grown. The interest in women's sports has grown, in women's soccer, thanks to, in large part, the success of the women's national team over the last 30 years.
There are so many different themes that I could connect to so many different kind of areas in women's sports when you talk about owner interest and, you know, cause versus business venture, really, especially in the WNBA, which is kind of where my background is rooted. But it's been a hard road for the NWSL, too, to get where it is today. 2 years ago, U.S. Soccer published a report following a year-long investigation by Sally Yates. She's the former acting attorney general. And she found, I'm quoting here, abuse and misconduct were pervasive and systematic at the highest tiers of women's professional soccer. How did that Yates investigation come about? What did she find? Tell us a little bit about that whole thing.
So in 2021, U.S. Soccer hired Yates to investigate the league after a series of reports in the Washington Post and The Athletic pointed out several allegations of abuse against numerous coaches across different teams in the league. So sexual misconduct, in some cases, coaching tactics in some cases, a sweeping scandal that affected a lot of different teams in the league. And multiple coaches ended up resigning. The league's commissioner and its top lawyer resigned. And in the first weekend that games returned, at that time in 2021, the players in several matches actually stopped play and all gathered in the center of the field to, make a statement demanding more from the league, demanding more from the sponsors that were in the league at that time to take the sport, these players seriously. And I think that was, a major turning point in the history of this league.
So, Steve, was everything kind of fixed with a snap of the fingers? I imagine not. But kind of how did Sally Yates's report affect the league? And what has the league done now from the standpoint of player safety to kind of solve those problems?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of protocols were put into place, a lot of safety checks with the hiring of coaches and players understanding what their rights are and not being afraid to speak up. And you have a much better group of coaches in the league. You have players who feel supported by their owners, by their coaches, by their union.
And we're obviously kind of in a period where the women's sports landscape feels really rich right now. We're coming out of an Olympic year where, Simone Biles, Katie Ledecky, there's a lot going on in the WNBA. Steve, where does the NWSL fit into all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you start with sports, you have to begin with TV. And there's more exposure of the NWSL than ever before because of their new contract signed last year with multiple platforms. You see matches now on CBS.
I watched on ABC this weekend. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's games on standard platforms. You don't have to search very hard anymore to see these matches. And, this weekend for the final, CBS is showing the game in prime time. That's a big deal. So I think in that sense it's grown. Attendance has gone up. Places like Portland have always drawn well. But, when you look at, let's start in Washington. A couple of years ago, they hosted a playoff game and drew, 5,000, 6,000 fans. 2 playoff home games this year, they sold out Audi Field, 19,000 plus. And you're seeing growth in other markets. Kansas City, the site of the final, the owners built their own stadium. And this isn't a shared stadium with MLS or a football team or a college or anything. This is for the Kansas City Current. So, things are moving up.
I'm glad you brought up that media rights deal. I do have the numbers in front of me. So the new media rights deal that was just signed about a year ago, is going to pay $240 million overall over 4 years. So what's that, $60 million a year? Quick maths, yeah. Under the previous deal, CBS Sports, so that's no ESPN, no ABC. I can't even remember. It was like CBS Sports Network, which is like up with C-SPAN that I would find these games on, paid $1.5 million annually. So that's a lot more and a lot better.
Going back even further, when this league first started, games were live streamed for free on YouTube. And as recently as 2018, games were airing on Lifetime. And now fast forward to 2024, this year we saw ESPN carry a women's sports doubleheader, which had an NWSL game to start and a WNBA game right after. So things have come a very long way.
I didn't know Lifetime was still a network. I actually had forgotten that. And kind of speaking of the money, Ella, you were just up in New York on Tuesday doing a story on Michelle Kang, who's the owner of the Washington Spirit. She made her money in tech, healthcare tech, I believe. But who is Michelle Kang? How important is she to this league? I've heard her called one of the most important figures in women's soccer.
I will go one step further. Michelle Kang, as you said, might be one of the most important people in women's sports right now. Definitely women's soccer worldwide. She is the founder of a healthcare technology company that's based in Virginia. And just a few years ago, she did not know much at all about soccer. So after the U.S. women won the World Cup in 2019, Michelle Kang was one of several business people in the D.C. area invited to join the ownership group of the Washington Spirit, the local NWSL team here.
What do you mean invited? Who invited her?
The previous owner at the time, and this is something we see in a lot of NWSL groups. So we see, maybe one majority owner, but then a lot of small investors. So Magic Johnson is a smaller investor under Michelle Kang, the majority owner in the Washington Spirit. If you think about Angel City out in California, their ownership group has, more celebrities than
Serena Williams' daughters are like owners of Angel City.
Exactly. And you can go down the list of Hollywood celebrities. But anyways, in Michelle Kang's words, she saw a business opportunity that was being undervalued in women's soccer. And, for years, as Steve mentioned earlier, women's soccer had been viewed as through almost a charitable or a moral lens. You know, like, this is a thing you should support because girls need role models and it's the right thing to do to support women playing sports. And Michelle Kang saw women's soccer beyond that. So Michelle Kang took full control in 2022. And since then, she has really poured resources into the Washington Spirit. She oversaw a full-time move to Audi Field in D.C., away from the suburbs, playing in Virginia. She has hired high-profile talent to coach the team and also to oversee areas like sports science and the health and performance of female athletes specifically. That has been a huge passion of hers. And she hasn't stopped with just the Spirit. And, you know, she purchased a team in France. She purchased a team in England. Just this week, she announced a $30 million donation to U.S. soccer to specifically support the girls' youth national teams and add more female coaches and female referees into, you know, the greater U.S. soccer ecosystem. So she has walked the walk and thrown a lot of resources into women's soccer because she believes in the product and its potential. And, you know, now she's reaping the benefits because her Washington Spirit team is about to play for the NWSL championship.
And she just donated $30 million to U.S. soccer, not NWSL. So she's
Correct.
Just like, you get a check, you get a check.
And I think that's an interesting move. You know, like, she could have just poured a lot of resources into the Spirit's youth academy, but instead she went for this sort of big swing to impact American soccer as a whole.
Wow. Your role models really go from soccer players to healthcare tech billionaires who are able to own multiple soccer teams. And that's growing up in America. No, just kidding. After the break, we are going to get into everything you need to know ahead of Saturday's championship match. We'll be right back. Okay, so with everything we just talked about, I'm so excited for this weekend. It does feel like a big culmination of a dramatic few years for the NWSL, a big celebration of the game. It is the Washington Spirit versus the Orlando Pride. What do I need to know about the Spirit before Saturday?
I mean, Washington Spirit has been, on paper, just this incredibly talented young group led by Trinity Rodman. But injuries have devastated them and seemed like it was going to derail this season. Andy Sullivan went out with a knee injury. Croy Bethune, the Rookie of the Year, went out with an injury. So it's been a weird year for this team. You know, but Rodman is one of the most exciting players in the world. She's coming off a spectacular Olympics, and she's the focal point of this team. But there's a lot of young players, and, you know, these players have matured and come around very quickly and had a major impact. It also helps to have a great veteran goalkeeper, and Aubrey Kingsbury is that player. This is a team that finished second overall, but really, I mean, I was surprised they would get to the final because of all the injuries and everything. I thought Gotham, the defending champion, would probably knock them off in the semifinals. And here Washington finds itself in the final.
Ella, tell me about, I know this team has kind of scraped by the skin of its teeth, but like, tell me about the vibes at Audi Field too and what it was like. Were you there for the shootout?
I was there for both of the playoff games this season.
Okay.
And I think the Spirit finished second in the NWSL this year. So on paper, they're not exactly an underdog, but because of all those injuries that Steve mentioned, because this team is pretty shorthanded when it comes to missing a few of its star players out with major injuries, many people did not expect them to reach the final. And the Spirit won its first playoff game in extra time, won the second playoff game in front of 19,000 people at Audi Field in a penalty shootout. Aubrey Kingsbury saves 3 penalties in a row. The Spirit makes 3 penalties in a row. Audi Field
I feel nauseous. Oh my God. That's so I feel like tense right now listening to you describe that.
But there's something that's, you know, never say die, almost gritty magic about this team that it just keeps finding ways to win. And now it's in the NWSL final.
And if that name sounds familiar to you and you are not a women's soccer fan, that is Rodman of Dennis Rodman. Yes, that's her dad. Okay, so Steve, what about Orlando? So Washington finished second in the league. Orlando was the top team, right?
Yeah, top team. They didn't lose until deep in the regular season. I mean, this was a record-setting regular season for Orlando Pride. Yeah, they've been the best team from start till almost finish, and they're almost at the finish line now. They've just been devastating throughout the year. Really no lulls until late in the regular season. They dropped a couple games, but they will go into the final as the favorite, led by a Zambian forward, Barbara Banda, who has 13 goals, plus 6 assists, which is impressive for a striker. And then they have the great Marta, perhaps the greatest player in women's soccer history, 38 years old, still doing incredible things, scored a sensational goal in the semifinals. She keeps doing it. It's amazing. And, I think there's a lot of women's soccer fans outside of Washington who would love to see Marta win the championship. She's 38, she can still play and she's still effective, but her career's nearing the end. She's never won a World Cup and she's never won an Olympics. She's come close. And this certainly isn't as big as those in your career, but this seems like her moment if the Washington Spirit doesn't get in her way.
I was going to say, I remember sitting in France this summer during the Olympics watching that gold medal match between the U.S. and Brazil, obviously Marta's team. And I mean, the ovation that Marta got at the end of that game after losing that game ranks up there with the biggest ovations I've ever heard in my sports career. That was pretty cool. But Ella, what does the future hold for the NWSL if we're talking about all this progress the league has made? Again, just good business. You've got owners who are invested. You've got a strong union now. What is next?
I think it's very fitting that in this year of attendance growth and viewership growth and sponsorship growth and increases in all these different areas that we have an NWSL final between two teams who are there because they did the work and because they made the investments and they're now seeing the benefits.
I love that.
Washington, we talked about Michelle Kang and all the investments she's made into creating a great environment at Audi Field. Orlando has put together one of the most smartly constructed rosters in the NWSL, putting up the money to get two-star international players such as Barbara Banda and Marta and building a smart roster around them. And not to get all sentimental, but the NWSL has come a very far way. And we've talked about, the changes that this league has just undergone in the past few years. And I think those changes are going to continue. Valuations of teams are really high. Just a few years ago, it cost a team $2 million to enter as an expansion team into this league. And the latest round of expansion, that fee was up to $50 million, which is a pretty drastic increase. When you think about, I don't know if we've mentioned it, but the Washington Spirit did win a title in 2021. So 3 years ago, they had a rocky stretch in between 2021 and now, but they have been here before. But if you think about the last time that the Washington Spirit was playing for a title, things were still really dark for this league. And now I think there's a lot that's bright.
That feels like a good place to leave things. So Ella Brockway and Steve Goff cover soccer for The Post. Thank you so much to both of you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for Post Reports. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was produced by Bishop Sand with help from Lucas Trevor. It was edited by Maggie Penman and Allie McAdam. It was mixed by Justin Garish. If you're looking for more podcasts from The Post, check out The 7. It comes out every weekday morning by 7 a.m. and gives you the 7 stories you need to know to get your day going. I'm your guest host, Ava Wallace. Martine Powers will be back tomorrow with more stories from The Washington Post.